And now for the last look. This week, more than a dozen world leaders gathered in Russia on the banks of the Volga River for the 16th annual BRICS summit. No longer just Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, the bloc has expanded to include Egypt, Ethiopia, the UAE, and Iran. In fact, the group now represents nearly half the world's population. The summit was perhaps most meaningful for its host, President Vladimir Putin, who is eager to show the West that his country is not a global pariah. He made the typical grand pronouncements that the grouping represented the rise of a multipolar world order and that the countries represented there are essentially the drivers of global economic growth. So is BRICS going to become an all-powerful anti-Western alliance? It's pretty unlikely. The BRICS grouping has never delivered on its early promise. The term BRIC was coined by the then chief economist at Goldman Sachs, Jim O'Neill, in a paper published in November of 2001. It was primarily an economic concept. O'Neill believed that four large countries in the developing world, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, would drive global growth for decades to come. By 2050, he predicted they would dominate the global economy, with China becoming the world's largest economy by 2041. The idea took off. As the FT notes, dozens of investment firms created BRIC funds. Multinational corporations developed BRIC business strategies. Business schools launched BRIC courses. A BRIC think tank was born in Rio. And for the first decade after 2001, those four countries lived up to the hype mostly. They clocked impressive growth, especially China, with growth rates often in the double digits. India, China, and Brazil were remarkably resilient against the shock of the 2008 financial crisis. And then an idea born in an investment bank became a geopolitical reality. Russia held the first BRICS summit in 2009 in Yekaterinburg, Russia. The heads of state from those four original countries agreed to reduce reliance on the US, move away from the dollar, and advocate for a larger role for developing countries in global decision-making. In 2010, South Africa joined the bloc, hence BRICS. It seemed that Goldman's predictions were coming true. But then it fell apart. Russia was hit by oil price volatility, high inflation, and stalled reforms. A commodities boom had driven Brazil's economy in the aughts, but it never fully recovered from the subsequent bust. China is in one sense the star of the BRICS, the biggest economy in the bloc by far, but its collapsing real estate sector, indebted state-owned enterprises, and its government's crackdown on its tech sector have very recently stalled growth. As a geopolitical entity, BRICS hasn't accomplished much either. It formed the New Development Bank in 2014 as an alternative to institutions like the World Bank, which are dominated by the West, but it has remained ineffectual. As Foreign Policy notes, it planned to make $8 to $10 billion worth of loans last year, compared to the World Bank's $73 billion. And it can't loan to Russia due to US sanctions. Part of the problem is that the BRICS are a random assortment of countries. They don't have much by way of common interests. Russia and China are autocracies with hardened anti-Western stances. India and Brazil are large democracies and American allies that prefer not to antagonize the West. India and China are often openly hostile neighbors. These countries don't even have economic common cause. Brazil and Russia are energy exporters who do well as energy costs rise. India is an importer that favors low energy prices. And even Jim O'Neill, the former Goldman economist who delivered us the term with so much optimism 2 decades ago, admitted in an op-ed last week that the BRICS still don't matter, criticizing the bloc for, among other things, not committing to more open trade. Where these countries are drawn together, writes Keith Johnson at Foreign Policy, is in a growing resentment of Western hypocrisy and hegemony, a feeling that has grown over expanded US sanctions, the dominance of the dollar, and the war in the Middle East. Shared resentment might make for lively dinner conversation, but it is not enough to forge a formidable bloc. Say what you will about the G7, that grouping works because its constituent countries, all advanced economies, all but Japan Western powers, have affirmative values in common. All are committed to free markets and democracy. All are committed to the rule of law at least in principle, though members sometimes fail in the even application of that principle. If the countries of the BRICS want to truly prepare themselves for a multipolar world, or even to hasten its arrival, they should find some positive shared values and work earnestly on realizing them. Thanks to all of you for being part of my program this week. I will see you next week.